All right, so welcome to topic 2 of civic education. So last time we focused on the Zambian constitution. If you guys can remember, if you don't, please watch the first video. We defined what a constitution is. We talked about the different types of constitutions, like written constitution, unwritten constitution, a rigid constitution, and flexible constitution. And we did focus on the merits and demerits of each individual types of the constitution. We talked about a brief history of the Zambian constitution and all types of constitutional reform commissions that were formed, from the Choma Review Constitutional Commission to the Mvunga Constitutional Review Commission to the Mwanakatwe and Mugobe Review Constitutional Commission. We talked about the characteristics of a good constitution and indeed the importance of the good constitution and some of the components of the Zambian constitution. And finally, we also looked at briefly some past paper questions that you're supposed to revise and study and focus on, because I'm trying to nurture research skills. So try going beyond your notes and gathering all the different types of material that you have in order for you to fully grasp, in-depth learning. You have to focus on the details. So today we're going to look at governance. Our learning objectives for today is that you have to have a clear distinction, a clear definition of what governance is and characteristics that make up good governance. You have to know the governance systems in Zambia, the importance of good governance, and characteristics of good governance, and as well as the characteristics of bad governance. You ready? I'm definitely ready. So I want you to understand something, that Zambia is relatively a peaceful country. So in the past 30 years or so, plus 30 years, Zambia has been a regional model in both Africa and the surrounding diaspora, as well as globally. Zambia has been a regional model of peaceful and multi-party political transitions. Despite its impressive economic growth, there's still a lot to do in terms of positive socioeconomic conditions for the majority of Zambians. And a good step towards achieving this socioeconomic development in a positive light is knowledge. So just by you having this knowledge in civic education, you're actually going beyond the classroom, but you are now feeding into society systems and becoming more informed citizens. And I actually want you to take this information and not just use it for your exam, but use it to make informed decisions as Zambian citizens. So we have to know our definitions. So the first thing that we have to define is what government means, because government feeds into governance. Their prefix is much less the same, to govern. So government means a governing body of a nation, a state, or a community. So that body that has been appointed by the people involved in that nation, state, or community. And those people are usually called citizens. Governance, on the other hand, is the way people are ruled. But if you want to go into more detail, because people is actually limited, because government feeds into proper structured bureaucratic systems. Therefore, governance can also be defined as the system by which entities are directed and controlled. It is concerned with structure, like I mentioned, and processes for decision-making, accountability, control, and behavior at the top of that entity. So one of the biggest things that you need to understand about governance is that it's there to ensure accountability, because as citizens, you have to You have to live in a country or a state where you know that whatever is happening to your country, be it positive or negative, there should be some form of accountability and transparency in those decision-making processes, be it on a state level or an individual citizenship level. So governance or good governance is all about accountability, because you have to protect your human rights within your government or state. Good governance in this sense means effective and efficient structures which provide optimal support to citizens in leading a safe and a productive life in line with their desires and responsibilities, the things I'm just from mentioning. And how do you achieve that? Students, how do you achieve that? How do you achieve good governance? You need to be in a democracy. You have to involve good social welfare, and you have to make sure that everyone is subject to the same laws. Everyone is held accountable to the same types of laws, regardless of their socio-economic status. They are called social determinants. So no one is above the rule of law. So throughout this discussion, we're going to be focusing on this very important topic on governance. Okay, so let's proceed. So governance and government, like I mentioned, you have to be able to clearly distinguish the two of them. And you also have to know the different types of wings of the government. So this structure here, you have to know it in great detail, or else civic education in Zambia will not make sense. You might end up having a poor grade if you actually don't understand the meaning of this diagram, because if we say checks and balances, we're talking about these three wings here of the government. So you have the president, the vice president, then you have got these three, they call them organs of the government. One of them makes the laws. The one that makes the laws is called the legislature. So the legislature makes the laws. These laws are passed on to the National Assembly of Parliament, where you have your members of parliament. The executive, you carry out the laws, where you have your cabinet ministers, your provincial ministers, and the civil service. The judiciary, the law enforcers, you have your chief justice, your judges, and the magistrate. So all these three exist. So all these three exist as independent entities, but they share a mutual relationship. So they are not mutually exclusive. They do share individual responsibilities. They are independent of one another, but they have to constantly make sure that each individual organ of the government is doing its job to actually maintain good democracy, good accountability, therefore good governance. This is called checks and balances. So you have to be able to use this terminology within your essays. So think about me when you're in your exam, that video that I watched said something about this. And this is the terminology that I have to use, mutually exclusive, they are independent, but they have to be able to check on one another to ensure that you have got this accountability, this democratic state, which feeds or which results into good governance. You have to be able to, your essay has to come out like this, so that the person marking you will be like, wow, we're really doing good. Let's just give this person their credit or their merit or their distinction so that they move on with their lives. Like I said, remember, civic education, you can't go around and say, I'm just going to use common sense to pass. It doesn't work like that. So remember what I said, good governance is about having a good form of accountability. So good governance means a government which is in authority is legitimate. By legitimate, there hasn't been some form of coup d'etat by the military or a self-imposed dictatorship rule. Legitimate means government of the people, by the people, elected by the people. That's what it means by a government is legitimate and respects democratic principles, such as respecting the rule of law, as well as human rights. Human rights, you can't escape from this topic. Human rights and citizenship, these two topics are interlinked, and a good portion of your exam is actually based on human rights and citizenship. So we're going to have very detailed notes and a very detailed discussion on those two. You can study in advance. A good government should be practiced at family, school, community, and national levels. So this is the bureaucratic nature that I spoke of about the government, that it's a good structured system that can be applied at all levels. So in a family, there can be a structural system of governance where you have got your children, you have got your spouse, your husband and your wife, and you are there to form a good democratic system and a good way to govern your family. Even at your school, you have got, the head, the deputy head, senior teachers, etc., as well as your community and the national levels. So good governance has to be practiced. And what is good governance? Good governance, even if you've forgotten, every time you just see good governance, there should be a big capital letter A that should appear in front of your brain. And that big capital letter A is accountability. Well, okay, great. So good governance, we go on with the characteristics. It's in line with human rights. I keep on mentioning this. So it enables citizens to enjoy full human rights and freedoms. Accountability, don't forget that. So citizens vote out leaders who fail to perform. Even if a president hasn't actually finished a full term of office, the citizens can say, no, we've had enough, we're going to elect a new president. You have actually failed to perform. The rule of law has to be respected. Good governance means everyone is subjected to the same types of treatment and the same types of laws. And there are some very, very important elements of good governance that you have to consider. The first one that I said is that diagram that you have to know, is that you have to have different types of organs of the government that are not mutually exclusive. So meaning all three organs of the government, the executive, the judiciary, as well as the legislature, have to be able to work independently. But there should be mutualism between the three, meaning all three have to benefit from their different functions. But again, they have to be able to check on one another to ensure that they are all practicing sound democratic principles that feed into good governance. Where there's good governance, there's political tolerance. And everyone has the right to have their own political party, to be proud of the political party that they are involved in, even if that political party expresses different views. So that's political tolerance that we're talking about. Good governance also involves good freedom of press. So in as much as you have political tolerance, you also have to have a free press where the media is actually free to express their views and communicate to the Zambian public or worldwide about the political situation and the relevant news that's actually happening within and outside of the country. Good governance always has to respect the rule of law. No one's above the law. There should be fairness. Fairness means each citizen should be subject to the same types of services, regardless of your gender, whether someone has a mental condition or a physical disability or a religious affiliation. So if you are a Zambian Hindu, if you are a Zambian Muslim, if you are a Zambian Christian, you are all subject to the rule of law, and you have to have fairness and political tolerance. A good governance system has to be helpful and respectful. Good government should be helpful and care for the interests of the citizens at home and abroad. You recently saw this. Students were actually stuck in Ukraine, and the Zambian government was actually able to bring them back safely into the country. So that shows good governance in this current republic. So there should be a multi-party system. So there should be an existence of multiple political parties, because multiple political parties observe the ruling party intensely, such that if the ruling party is doing something illegal, they can inform the different wings of the government. So it actually promotes checks and balances. Even if the country has 10 political parties, it doesn't matter. That shows good governance. So regular and free elections. No wonder Zambia is actually regarded as a good standard of good governance, because we always have regular, free, and fair elections. That big A word that I told you about, accountability. So governance is all about accountability and transparency. So accountability, we're talking about holding someone responsible for their actions. And transparency, we're talking about keeping everything, don't keep things away from the public. Make the public be aware of the national budget, for example, the social and economic status of what's happening within our country. Why don't we have drugs in our pharmacy, in our hospital pharmacies, when indeed we're actually paying for NEMA services? So what's happening? You know, we have to have this form of transparency and accountability. So these are some of the characteristics of good governance. So where there is good governance, there's an equal and opposing force. Now we're talking about Newton's laws, but anyway, never mind that. So characteristics of bad governance. So you just take the opposite and you deduce from those. So a state where there's actually no accountability, no transparency, there's just social, economic, and political neglect, dictatorship, no multi-party system, lack of separation of powers. The judiciary may have all the power, they can do whatever they want, the executive can make all their rules that they want. So there is this lack of separation of powers, lack of citizen participation. On top of that, they even put in a curfew saying citizens are not allowed to travel within specific amounts of, between specific time intervals. Neglect of public welfare, schools abandoned, colleges, universities abandoned, a decline in public health system, irregular and unfair elections. You just find that, you know, Russia is a good example. You just find one person leading, and other countries actually. No freedom of press. I literally told you that where there's good governance, there is a free press that's able to inform its citizens through the media. That where you just have one channel, one political party, and just preaching this false political agenda, that's actually called propagandalism. So there's this false news and political propaganda that puts that bad government in good light because they are actually having full control of the media. Restriction of political activities, no political rallies, no checks and balances, total violation of human rights. The judiciary is not independent, meaning no one, meaning the rule of law will not be protected, which also results in arbitrary arrests, meaning anyone can be arrested. You try to stand up for your rights, you make a funny comment on social media about the government or a minister within the government, and you're arrested for 5 years. So these are all characteristics of bad governance. So we have to be able to appreciate the significance of our traditional sector in Zambia, because we do realize that before democracy, before the colonial rule, we had we do have different tribal groups and different chiefdoms present throughout the country. So Zambia, you have to be able to understand this. Zambia has what we call a plural legal system consisting of the general rule, the general law based on the English law. And we also have something known as a customary law, and a variety of bodies of rules and practices generated by semi-autonomous social groups like, the church. So plural, meaning a lot, the general law, the constitution, then you have your customary law, and other small aspects like the religious groups. Customary law consists of customary laws of each Zambian's 73 ethnic groups. No wonder we have to talk about the House of Chiefs. Customary law is a law consisting of customs that are accepted as legal requirements or obligatory rules of conduct, practices, and beliefs that are so vital and intrinsic part of a social and economic system that they are treated as if there were laws. So that's what customary laws are. Some customary laws are actually not that productive, like early marriages. So those certain customary laws have to be abolished and fought. So let's talk about the House of Chiefs. So the House of Chiefs, House of Chiefs, even the definition itself has to tell you what it is. So it consists of 27 traditional leaders, and each province will elect 3. We have 10 provinces in Zambia, so now it means we have 30. The term of office is just 3 years, but you can run a certain time, but you cannot run for a third time. The House of Chiefs elects a chairperson and the vice chairperson from among themselves. And what do they actually do? So they actually sit to discuss bills affecting customs and traditions, because the Constitution is vast and it does affect certain customs and traditions. And sometimes they believe that, our traditional values and cultures should not be eroded, even if they are necessarily harmful, like let's say female circumcision, which is considered female genital mutilation, it's bad. So some of those things, traditions and customary laws, like I mentioned, are not actually productive. So these guys actually discuss the bills affecting their customs and traditions and their practices. They debate and pass decisions on matters relating to customary laws and customs, to discuss and decide on any matters referred to it by the president, who then submits this. So they only make suggestions, and these suggestions actually go to the National Assembly. So they don't actually have a full body of power. So it has no real influence on issues of the government and development. It also plays a very insignificant advisory role. Like I said, they're just there to advise. because what they advise, what they debate on has to go to the National Assembly. And thankfully, chiefs are not allowed to join a political party like members of parliament because they have great influence over their chiefdom. So they're not allowed to join any political party, but they can be in a governing body like the House of Chiefs. Assignment. I want you to go into details of the different types of electoral systems in Zambia. I want you to research on the different types of electoral systems, their characteristics, and their features. So all this is just summed in one simple table, but I want you to go beyond this. Single member plurality system, or the first past the post, where the candidate who scores the highest score wins. Single member majoritarian system, where the candidate who scores above average, so who scores 50+1 or 50% and above of the votes cast wins. Proportional representative system, where you use a party list system. The parliamentary seats are given according to what a party has obtained in an election, and then the leader with actually the highest votes forms government together with their members of parliament. Then you have got a mixed member proportionality system, which is a combination of the single member plurality system and the proportional representational system. So what I want you to do, just this last part, I want you to read on the different electoral systems in Zambia in detail. Then after you read those things in details, I want you to come back and answer these past paper questions. You have to go beyond yourself. Use these videos, watch the videos, study your notes, get your highlighters, get your brainworks book, highlight, research, get sticky notes, answer these past paper questions, write them down, like past paper questions, write them down together with your notes. Make studying fun, research. Your future lies in your hands. This has been Brainworks Education. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next topic on citizenship. Bye.